Hey guys, I'm here with Nate, head of growth at Bancor. He'll be doing a Liquidity Hacking 101, how to launch and fund a successful automated market maker. Can you guys confirm in the chat that you can hear him? I think the chat is working now, or it is not. It does.
Hey
Okay,
guys,
perfect. Uh, okay, I'll let
cool.
him.
I can see the chat. All set? Nice. Hey guys, I'm Nate from Bancor. I'm going to be talking about liquidity hacking today. Bancor is an on-chain liquidity protocol that enables automated decentralized exchange on Ethereum and across blockchains. When Bancor went live in 2017, it was the first sort of DEX protocol based on automated market makers. And since then, we've seen a kind of explosion in the usage of automated market makers and development on the primitive. So let's dive right in. Let me just share slides right here. And oops, let me toggle my screen, make sure I'm doing that correctly. Toggle video. Cool. Can everyone, okay. Awesome. Cool. So just briefly breaking down the agenda. And again, guys, I can't see questions in full screen. So just add the questions to the chat and I will get to them at the end. But briefly, what we're going to be covering is a quick history of automated market makers from 2017 to present, the sort of obstacles to widespread adoption of automated market makers that we're facing today. We're going to discuss sort of hacking on bonding curves as a way to optimize automated market makers. And finally, Bancor V2, which we announced just last week. It's launching this quarter and addresses kind of some of the critical issues that we see preventing the more widespread adoption of AMMs. So just briefly diving into what are automated market makers, there are kind of three key features that make them different than order book-based exchanges. First, there's this idea of constant liquidity, where there's no need to really match a buyer and a seller because all orders are instantly fulfilled by the AMM. So traders don't have to deal with order books, and all liquidity is stored fully on chain. Then there's also transparent and deterministic pricing. So, the deterministic pricing is sort of based on the amount of liquidity that is in the AMM, as well as the size of an order submitted to an AMM. So as the size of the order increases, the price paid per unit of the token increases. And as the size of the AMM's liquidity increases, the price paid per unit decreases. And because these are sort of known quantities before a trader submits a transaction, the cost of the trade can be calculated transparently and deterministically prior to its submission. And then the last point here is that liquidity provision to AMMs is democratized. Market making income has historically only been available to those with either kind of privileged access to exchange operators or those with kind of considerable amounts of liquidity to deploy. And the beauty of AMMs is that anyone with any amount of latent capital can add their tokens to an AMM and passively earn trading fees on their funds. So just stepping back into the kind of quick history of AMM protocols, 2017 and 2018 were really proof of concept years where we saw early development of the primitive and liquidity providers sort of dipping their toe into the water. Bancor was the first AMM-based protocol, followed by Uniswap. And then in the past year or so, we've seen development really spike as well as usage. And a big part of this activity has been aggregators like 1inch, Paraswap, DexAG, 0x, and Kyber, who really started to plug into AMM-based liquidity. And this has created sort of a real-time competition where any AMM offering the best price at any given moment stands to win the trade and in turn the trading fee. So anyone can really spin up a AMM, and this has created a sort of new segment of DeFi users known as liquidity hackers, who create and contribute liquidity to AMMs in exchange for the trading income. And then as an AMM creator, the game is really to balance between trader and liquidity provider incentivization, because you must attract both parties to really build a successful AMM. And what's key here is that really any AMM can rise to the top and create this sort of virtuous cycle of liquidity generating lower slippage, which attracts trade volume, which generates trading fees, and this trading income then attracts even more LPs. And so as an AMM creator, you have access to sort of numerous different protocols to build your pool or to contribute to a pool. And each one of these protocols, you also have access to sort of numerous different parameters available to optimize your AMM for low slippage and also high revenue. And each liquidity protocol kind of offers a different level of flexibility to play with these parameters. So just breaking down each one of these parameters, you can create pools with any number of reserve tokens. The most common and basic implementation is a 2-token AMM, but in protocols like Bancor and Balancer, you can add more tokens than that. Then there is the fee, which is extracted from each trade, and it's adjustable in Bancor and Curve and Balancer, and it remains fixed in Uniswap. The weights refer to the percentage exposure of each token in the AMM. So for instance, you can build an AMM that always maintains 80% of its value in one token and 20% of its value in the other token. Within the most common kind of implementation that you're probably used to is a 50-50 breakdown, which is fixed in Uniswap, and it's most common throughout the industry. And then there are the asset types, and here we've seen protocols like Curve and Shell Protocol really specialize in stable coins for some reasons I'll discuss later. And then protocols like Bancor and Uniswap and Balancer offer solution for any type of ERC20 token. Okay, cool. So really, what is optimal? And as an AMM creator, when experimenting with different parameters, it's really important to consider the trade-offs. And this is just kind of an example trade-off. With a 2-token AMM, which is the most common, maintaining 50-50 weighting, this is really the most optimal structure to drive the lowest slippage, as you can kind of see in this graph below. That point at the bottom, 50-50, offers the lowest slippage. But there also may be certain advantages to using uneven weights. So for instance, setting up a pool with, let's say, Link and ETH, you could set it with 80-20 weights, which means that users can add liquidity in mostly Link and only 20% in ETH. So since users can maintain a larger position in their own token, this may lead to more liquidity being added, and in turn, more trade volume and a more successful AMM. So these kinds of trade-offs should be considered when you're designing your pool. Okay, so far, so good. What is the catch? Why haven't we seen AMMs take over the world yet? Why do they still make up such a tiny fraction of total crypto trading volume? Why aren't more users aware of them and adding liquidity to this sort of new financial instrument? And so the answer really is that while AMMs have massive potential, they also have major problems. Across the industry, we've seen users and investors really point to their flaws. So they've gone so far as to call AMMs, fundamentally flawed, or a loser's product where, dumb traders are quickly being replaced by bots. And this is mostly referring to the flaws for liquidity providers, and really taking this idea of automated market makers enabling this passive market making accessible to any user. This idea is really starting to fade as some of the realities of AMM technology in their current form start to set in. And I think here, Allison Liu, the founder of UMA Protocol, really hit it on the head, that adding liquidity to an AMM is super simple, but it comes with some exotic financial risks. Does this matter? She asks. And increasingly, as the industry matures and a lot of users awaken to the sort of realities of AMMs, I think that answer is yes. And it does matter. And so we really need to address the sort of key obstacles to their adoption, the key problems of AMMs head on. And just breaking them down, and really the sort of top 3 obstacles that we at Bancor are focused on was, first, the number one is that they have low capital efficiency. And this really refers to the fact that AMMs require a substantial amount of liquidity in order to reduce slippage enough to compete on pricing with order book based exchanges. The second sort of key obstacle is the fact that liquidity providers often suffer impermanent loss, meaning they perform worse than if they had just held the tokens that they staked, if they had just held them on their own in their wallets. And the third is that LPs are required to add liquidity to AMMs with multiple tokens. And as a result, they're exposed to the price movements of every token in the AMM. And so let's break these issues down a little further. Recall that slippage is a function of order size and the total amount of liquidity in the AMM. And the issue we're seeing today is that most AMMs utilize only a small percentage of their total liquidity to process the most common trades. So as you can see here, given an AMM with an initial liquidity of 100,000 DAI and 1,000 ETH, if a user submits a trade that utilizes any more than 5% of the AMM's total liquidity, they'll see at least 5% slippage. And a trade using 10% of the available liquidity would result in over 10% slippage. So these are pretty high figures, high slippage numbers. And so since most users would really never take these trades, over 5% or over 10% because this slippage is so high, this really begs the question of what happens with the remaining 95% or 90% of the liquidity in the AMM. And the answer is, with most AMMs, it's never really utilized. And so that's really the key issue that we have with capital efficiency. And so moving on to impermanent loss, we can see that here in this graph to the left, and also these numbers on the right, you can see that even normal price movements between the tokens in an AMM, so normal market conditions, can lead to LPs losing money. And you can see from this graph on the left, this sort of blue line here is the opportunity range for an LP to not suffer impermanent loss. And this range, as you can see, is really fairly slim. So LPs, liquidity providers, are really betting on trading fees being greater than impermanent loss in order to generate a profit. And quite often that is not the case. Kind of this is a sort of key quote here, is that many users have realized that this isn't really passive market making. You need to actively monitor changes in the AMM and really quickly act on these changes in order to prevent losses. And in the graphs below, you can see that if someone held KNC or NMR in their respective Uniswap liquidity pools and just left them there for 6 months, they would have suffered heavy losses versus just holding the tokens on their own. So this is a key issue that we think really needs solving. And then the final sort of key issue, which is fairly straightforward and also related to the issue of impermanent loss, is this exposure to multiple tokens. So as mentioned, token holders and token teams who want to add to their AMMs have to do so with their own token and also a separate reserve token. And as a result, they can't maintain their long position on the token. So for instance, in the case of right here, Link, with the a Link pool on Uniswap, you would have to provide, as a liquidity provider or as the token team providing liquidity to the pool, you would need to provide liquidity with equal amounts Link and equal amounts ETH. You could use a tool like DeFi Zap or Bancor's new Zaps on 1inch, but that would split your Link again into half Link and half ETH. And so, here we can see, had you contributed liquidity to the Link ETH pool on Uniswap a year ago, you would have suffered fairly significant losses versus simply holding the Link on its own. So what are the solutions? And thankfully, there are some solutions on the way, and some of which have already arrived in the industry and are already kind of live and we're seeing play out. We can, breaking these down, we can reduce slippage using a custom bonding curve that utilizes 100% of the pool's liquidity. We can eliminate impermanent loss for any ERC20 token, either stablecoin or just a volatile asset, using a new type of AMM based on oracles that's being launched in Bancor v2. And we can also allow for single token exposure using this same oracle-based approach. And again, we can do all of these things for any ERC20 token and not just stablecoins. So let's dig into how these solutions really work. So as mentioned, the majority of AMMs today only use a small percentage of their available liquidity to process transactions, and this leads to a fairly high cost of trading. And so Curvify or Curve came along. They used to be called StableSwap, and they were really the first to introduce a more capital efficient bonding curve. So in the graph on the left, you can see that the dotted line represents the sort of bottom dotted line that represents the constant price curve. And this is where slippage is 0. And as you can see from the blue line, the curve formula allows for significantly lower slippage within a given range of liquidity. So the kind of further you drift from this equilibrium of 5 tokens and 5 tokens, you can still straddle this line of extremely low liquidity compared to Uniswap, where you see sort of drifts off that line when there is a change in the equilibrium state caused by one of these trades. And so this is effectively focusing the AMM's liquidity within a price range that represents the most common trades performed against the pool. And then, as you can see in the illustration on the right, slippage is extremely low, the blue line, representing an AMM with this sort of amplification coefficient, the sort of invariant that StableSwap pioneered. You can see that slippage is extremely low up to a given point, after which the slippage starts to spike, let's say around 70% or 80% of the liquidity used. So currently this model is limited to just stable coins using, and this is in Curve, and the Shell protocol has also seemed to adopt this model. And so Bancor V2 has also implemented a similar model, but Bancor V2 applies it to both stable and volatile assets. So users can create and fund AMMs that reduce slippage with really far less capital. And here is a comparison of the different sort of automated models between Bancor. Kyber recently launched an automated pricing reserve. Bancor V2 and Bancor V1 are there. Uniswap and Curve. And this shows the sort of different sized orders against a $100,000 pool and how much slippage those orders would incur. And as you can see, Bancor V2 is competitive with Curve in terms of slippage, while offering this functionality to both stable and non-stable coins. So we've started to tackle slippage in a very serious way with AMMs. Two more key solutions that are badly needed in the industry really need to address impermanent loss and multi-token exposure. And so in Bancor V2, we've figured out a way through using an Oracle system, specifically Chainlink's decentralized Oracle system, to eliminate impermanent loss and to also allow for single token exposure. And the easiest way to think about this is to kind of look at some existing solutions in the market, where we kind of already have some pools that are live in the industry that allow liquidity providers to really mitigate the risk of impermanent loss. And what we found is that impermanent loss is really tied to the divergence between the relative prices of tokens in AMMs. And this is really what causes the loss. So AMMs with stable coins in their reserves or with sort of wrapped versions of the tokens are particularly resilient to impermanent loss because there's very little divergence between the relative values of their token reserves. And so one example of this is the ETH pool. And because you have these mirror assets which track each other's prices and there's no divergence, as you can see from this blue line, which represents impermanent loss, it really doesn't move too often. And the yellow and red lines represent the sort of net profit, which is basically tracks the red line, which is the accumulated fees, and those kind of track each other. So yeah. And so finally, so moving on, Bancor V2 actually introduces a new type of AMM with pegged reserves. So we'll be releasing the full technical details of this design leading up to its release. But really, this new type of AMM utilizes Chainlink, a decentralized oracle, to hold the relative value of its reserves constant using prices from the oracle. So again, since the reserves are not diverging, you eliminate impermanent loss. And again, this is a solution that is available for both stable and volatile tokens. And key here to say there's no impermanent loss so long you have a dependency here as the token itself does not fail, and so long as the oracle doesn't fail as well. And so the second really kind of key innovation that our oracle-based approach.
Nate, I want to give you a quick time warning because I don't think you can see the screen, but we have 4 more minutes.
Sorry. So let me just run through this really quickly. This sort of this oracle-based approach also unlocks the ability for users to provide liquidity with 100% exposure to a single ERC20 token. So you no longer need to hold a separate reserve token, and you can really select your exposure to any token in the AMM, anywhere from 0 to 100%. And I guess to just end that, this V2 version is going live in hopefully sometime in Q2 2020. We're very excited to get it out there. We're very excited to release the full technical details and the open source code leading up to its release. We encourage everyone to come and talk to us, give us feedback in our Telegram channel, Bancor developers, and also we have new docs live that we encourage everyone to also check out. And with that, I hopefully did not go over time. Let me switch back to my video. Cool. All right. Wow. Says karate.
So maybe just one question, Nate,
sure.
and then we need to transition on.
Sure. I'm trying to scroll through a lot of these, and I can't seem to find. I'm just seeing a lot of conversation here. Not.
Nate, go to ask a question at the bottom. There's 4 different ones.
Got it. Cool. So, yeah. So, are there any techniques unique to AMMs you've seen LPs use to maximize their yield? Is one of the questions. And yeah, I think a place that's really ripe for innovation, and also something that V2 will enable as well, is integration with lending protocols, so that the AMM can actually lend out the pools in the token. The tokens in the pool to, say, staked or compound. And a user can basically, the pool is wrapping and unwrapping these tokens to enable the lending to occur while also enabling transactions to occur against the pool and users to contribute and withdraw liquidity in just the regular vanilla ERC20 tokens. So I think lending protocols are definitely an area that's ripe for innovation for AMMs.
All right, so I think we're out of time. We're going to transition on to the next session now. Thanks so much for the really great talk. It was awesome.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.